It's Wednesday, and I'm Shelley Pryor. I'm a realistic watercolorist in Ontario, Canada. And every week at this time, 10 a.m. Eastern Time, Toronto time, I am doing a live stream. So I hope you are joining me for the first time, or welcome back if you have been joining me for a long time. And for those of you that have been with me for a long time, I just want to say thank you. You guys are absolutely awesome. I see 101 greetings before I even get here, so that's wonderful. So today we're going to be talking about working wet on wet. This is one that mystifies so many new and even intermediate watercolorists. The reason is that they are not understanding the full capacity of water that is on the paper, the water that's in the brush. So we're going to talk about that. Let's jump in and take a look. So this is the reference picture that I'm going to be working from today. It is a beautiful sunset in Muskoka, Ontario. And what I'm especially interested in demonstrating today is this beautiful sky. Now, there's a couple of issues with this sky that could be problematic, and one of which is being this band of blue and purple and things like that are sort of mixed into these yellows and oranges. Well, we all know that orange and blue are complementary colors, and if they get mixed too much, it's not such a great color. So let's first talk about materials, because this is going to be a really important part of this particular exercise. If you are working on 100% cotton paper, you already have a bit of an advantage, and that's because the cotton paper has some absorbency. It has some tooth to it, and it has some absorbency. So when you start putting your washes down, the paint seeps into the paper. If you're using an economy type of paper, one that's probably says acid-free on it, then chances are it's less absorbent. Cotton's super absorbent, but wood pulp paper is less absorbent. That means that your paint is going to sit on the surface more so than going right into the fibers of your paper. For me, this is number one. This is, and if you're going to splurge on any of your materials, make it your paper. Good quality paint's a good aspect of this too, but and so are brushes. But most important, you want to have good quality paper. It's expensive, but it saves a lot of frustration. So next, we're going to be talking about some brushes. A lot of people will start off their big sky or whatever, and they're using maybe a brush this size on a paper that's this size. This is 11 by 15 inches. It's a quarter sheet. And if you're only using a brush that's this size, what size is this? It's a 1-inch brush. You're back and forth as fast as you can trying to get it wet, and it's not doing the job. This also doesn't hold quite as much paint. It is a synthetic hair, and it is not going to hold that much. So something like a hockey brush is good. This absorbs a lot of moisture. You can see that, the bristles are a little bit, they're lined up in a flat format, but there's more volume to, the overall bristles here. So they're going to hold more. If you don't have something like this, you could use an extra large brush. This one's also a synthetic, but it at least is a lot bigger. It's at least twice the size of this one, right? So this size or even larger on a sheet this big. Too many students just don't think that they're going to be using a big brush that often, but you do need to have one, if for nothing else, just to wet your paper. some people will even use a sponge, and they will use a sponge. I don't have one available at the moment, but a sponge to completely wet your paper. That's also a good alternative. But one thing I will say about brushing water on your paper, and that is you don't want to do this, press and pull. You want to just touch and pull. Touch. It's like a delicate thing, as if you're going to tear the paper when you're brushing. The people that are most notorious for doing this are people who are acrylic or oil painters, more acrylic painters than anything. But, when you're using a thicker consistency paint, you tend to have to wipe it off of the brush. Not the case with watercolor. It just falls off the brush. So get in the habit of holding your brush further back and using just the weight of the brush on the paper. It's going to make a big difference. You might not think it will, but after you've tried using a light touch more often, you're going to notice that, oh yeah, that's kind of make a difference. All right, so next we will talk about the paint. The paint consistency is going to be really important. Now, this is my standard palette that I use every week, and I have added a bunch of water to each of these wells. You can see some of them are like kind of running here, but so I've put a fair amount of water on these wells of paint, and then what that's doing is it's softening up all of the paint in the well. To the point where I could actually take a palette knife and actually push it down and touch the bottom of the well. If you're only spritzing the surface of your paint, there's a really good chance that you're only softening the surface. This is like submerging your paint, so it's going to make your paint a lot creamier. The other thing you could do is just take your paint right out of the tube and put it on your palette and work from fresh paint. So those are the options. Now, the paint quality will make a difference. Artist quality paints have a higher pigment load. What that means is that pigment's the most expensive part of the paint that you buy, the pigment itself. And if you're buying inexpensive paints, that means that they use less actual pigment and a lot more filler. So the more expensive paints that you use means that your colors are going to be a little bit richer. They're getting better all the time. Paints, they are getting more color rich, shall we say? Even the student qualities, they're working to improve these things all the time. I know from when I started really actively working in watercolor, the paints were. Of course, I was using student quality paint at the time as well, but the paints have vastly improved since the 80s. So let's just say. Okay, so first things first, I want to wet the paper. I have pre-stretched this paper, which means that I soaked it and stapled it down wet, and then I let it dry so that it became shrunk on its own. Cotton shrinks, so it shrinks and it becomes really, really tight. So then when it's all dry, because you can't tape onto something that's wet, so once it's all dry, then you can tape your edges and give you a nice clean edge. Keep the staples down, keep those edges from pulling up or anything like that. And I'm good to go. So this paper was pre-stretched. And a lot of people ask about, is it good to use a front side or a back side of a paper? I think you can use either side. And I'm just going to be adding some water here. I'm being generous with this too. But yes, you can use both sides of the paper. Some papers have a slightly different texture on each side, but both sides are definitely paintable. Now, the one I'm using here is Arches 140-pound cold press. Notice the light touch I'm using here. I'm not bending the bristles. I'm even sort of angling the brush like this, painting, like using the side on the surface more than the tip, like this. So I'm kind of laying the brush down. And now once I get all that water on there, then I start, like it's pretty loaded up right now. You can see it's like super glossy, and you can see it's going to start wrinkling. That is a normal part of the process. But I am redistributing because it's wrinkling, right? I'm redistributing all of this moisture so that as it starts absorbing, it doesn't, I'm not fighting puddles of wet as I'm going along. Now, if it feels like it's too wet, just give it a little time to soak in. It still might be a little wet, but I can also remove some of the water from the hockey brush and absorb a little bit of it if you've gone overboard with the water. But I'm redistributing so that when it wrinkles and goes into the valleys, it's going to even out the water on the surface. All right, so it's still pretty wet and it's starting to wrinkle. That used to freak me out so bad. But look at it wrinkling now. But it is glossy. This surface is really glossy at the moment. And you know, if you were watching me and not my surface, you'd see me leaning from one side to another, just looking at this shine on the paper. To me, this is the telltale sign of when the right time to hit the paper is. Okay, so let's talk about the puddle while this is soaking into the paper. The color that I'm going to use, let me wipe off my tape before I get it all over my table here, the water. I'm just going to wipe off this tape. Okay, so talking about my paint here, I want to start getting my colors ready. So that little blue streak didn't print out so well on this standard copy paper. It doesn't look that blue here. It's kind of taken on some of the orange tones. You can see better in the online image. And for those of you that are looking for this reference picture, by the way, it is listed, a link to it is listed under the video description. So you can find that there. The blue, to me, it's not quite cerulean and it's not quite cobalt. So I'm just going to take a little of each and get myself a mix. Now, the thing is, this is what everybody forgets. When you work on a wet surface, imagine if I took all this water off of here and added it to that puddle. That's essentially what you're doing when you're adding the puddle to the water. So that means that the paint needs to be darker than what you actually want to end up with. Significantly. I mean, we all know watercolor dries lighter, but oh my goodness, when you paint on wet, it will it'll almost double how light it's going to dry. I'm just going to give this another swoosh in all directions here, up and down and across. There we go. Just to redistribute that again. Let's take a look. It's okay. That's not quite as glossy. It's getting there. It's soaking into the paper. Now I've got my blue. This looks far darker than the blue right in here in that little band on the picture, and that's on purpose. I don't want to have a big wet sloppy puddle because I've already got wet and sloppy over here. Okay, so this is actually going to be not a super wet saturated puddle. I'm looking at some, this kind of what I would call a creamsicle color. Do you remember creamsicles? I don't know if you have those everywhere where you live, but creamsicles are this really nice popsicle that you could get. I'm going to go with it's an orange color. That much I know. I'm going to take a warm yellow. So this is like a gamboge that I am using. A Hansa Yellow Deep would probably be fine, things like that. I'm going to use Permanent Rose. All right, I've got my primaries going here, and I'm going to stir that together to see if I can replicate that orange color. Now, notice that I'm not making a big, wet, sloppy puddle. This is the really kind of the fundamental part of this, is we can't have a really wet puddle here if we're working on wet as well. Okay, so I'm going to just see if I have the color close, and I'm pretty satisfied with that. Below here it's a little bit lighter and maybe a little bit more yellow. So I'm going to take more of that gamboge, maybe just steal a little bit of this. Okay, I'm good with that. So I think I'm all right with my colors, and I haven't drawn anything on my paper yet. I've just taken my paper and just wet it, and I'm going to do the entire sky. Whenever you have something like this where it says a sunset or a sunrise, and you've got objects in front, they're almost always going to be silhouetted. So basically, anything I put on top of this will be silhouette, so I don't need to worry about blocking in any of those things first. What I do need to know is how far down I need to make, where I need to put this band of blue. So I would say maybe 1/3 of the way down is where that band of blue goes. But I'm going to take a look. Oh, it's getting to just about the perfect shine. And I hope you notice a difference between the shine at the beginning when it was really glossy and this one where it's kind of satiny. This is really key. So what I'm going to do, and by the way, I may do this in a couple of layers, just a little heads up there. But I'm going to blot my brush. This is a synthetic brush. It's not going to hold a ton of wet color because it is a synthetic. So I'm going to grab my blue, and I know it's going to be about 1/3 of the way down. And when you first start putting something like this into your wet surface, you might feel, I think that's too dark. Silence that voice, because it is going to dry a lot lighter than you think. When you work on wet paper, it's always going to dry a lot lighter than you expect. Now, there's another little segment right here that's shaped like this. One thing, I'm not sure if you're really catching it. Well, you can't really see it too well on camera, but I'm using the same light, delicate touch. And what's happening is, because this was not wetter than the paper, then it's staying pretty much where I'm putting it. Where you run into problems is if this is wetter than the surface. Now, all the time I'm talking, all the time I'm mixing, all the time I'm doing all of this stuff, like with every tick of the clock, this paper is drying. You know what that means? You've got to keep drying your brush. More and more, like the closer to dry the paper gets, the drier this has to get. And this isn't very wet to begin with. So I'm going to use a little bit bigger brush. Let's go to this one. I'm going to use a little bit of a bigger brush to start to put in some of these orange areas, but I think I need a little more than what I have mixed up here. Put a little permanent rose in it, just not as much as that puddle. So this is gamboge and permanent rose. It's not a big wet sloppy puddle that I can't control. Okay, and again, that really light kind of touch. And you see, I'm coming up, I'm kissing that blue. My brush is just slightly touching the blue. It doesn't even need to touch fully because the color is running on the paper. All right. I'm going to get this just a little bit wetter because it's not flowing enough. So a lot of this is a feel kind of thing. You have to feel the moisture in the brush, in the paper, etc. Holding the brush way back here so that it'll not put a lot of pressure on the paper. I almost feel like I could use an even bigger brush, or a brush that'll hold even more. I'm going to switch to this one here. So let's get a little bit more. And I won't get all of this done before this sort of that window, the shine on the paper is gotten to the point where it won't cooperate anymore. Look at the shine on the paper. It's wet. It's looking wetter where I painted than where I put the water, right? So there's a danger right there, that if I start continuing here, then if I start continuing at this stage, there's a high likelihood of me creating a blossom there or brush marks. So the shine on what I painted is wetter than the shine of the paper itself. So what do? Well, there's a couple of things I could do. Let me see if I can just find my... sorry, I'm just looking for my spray bottle. Here it is. I could spray the lower part and keep going. So now the lower part equals the shine that's on the painted part, right? Question. I saw a question earlier. Did I pick up the synthetic brush on purpose, and is because working wet on wet? I picked up the synthetic brush because I know that this isn't going to hold a lot of moisture. That's the danger, right? If you put too much moisture on something that's only damp, that's where the blossoms come from. But I'm still using that super light touch. All right, so now that I've got my paper sort of workable again with the spray bottle, I'm going to add a little bit more color. Actually, now that I wet it, I'm back to my synthetic brush. Don't need to be as concerned. It's going to flow a little better. And see, you don't see where that made a line there. If I had continued and not wet any of this down here, that's where I would have issues, because the I'd be working into a drier area and the paper will grab the color. And I know it kind of sounds like I'm over analyzing, but when I was learning watercolor, this was sort of this principle that I didn't understand, the dampness. And this is something I hear like every single day that I teach. I can't control the water. This is something so many people have issue with. It's mostly because, and this is the reason I'm saying so much about it, is that you're not consciously thinking, how much water's in here? How much water's in here? How much water's on the surface? They all have to work together. And if they don't, that's when the blossoms and the brush marks and nasty things happen. So I've learned that by observing the dampness on the paper, I'm able to predict what I can do, right? One thing I also want you to notice that I am doing, because this is a sunset, is I'm keeping the paint really transparent. Like I can see the paper right through it. I'm using transparent color on paper, but I'm also making it more transparent by watering it down. And that is so that I can create the illusion of light here. There's definitely going to be some more color that's coming in, probably another layer, but we'll see. Now if I go, okay, that's done, let's jump up here. Don't forget, there's no shine on that paper at the top. It's still wrinkled, so you can tell it's still wet, but there's no shine there. That could be a problem. And I know what you're thinking, because I can read your mind. You're thinking, well, why don't you just spray it and we can keep going? And I would accept that this is just dry enough. There's no shine left on that. When this part was wet, I was able to spray it, but I also kind of shielded it, right? Because I didn't want to make this extra wet. I wanted to just make it wet below. But if you have something here and this is dry, what's going to happen? If I spray, every droplet from that sprayer is going to make a little blossom, and it'll look like it rained on my painting. Scott says, grab the time machine, spray bottle. Yeah, but in this case, let me just call it, it's too far gone. Okay, I'm too far beyond that window that I can work. It takes a while to, and it'll take some hit and miss before you actually discover that, there's a limit to how far you can go. This part still is wet, so I'm going to take some of this deeper creamsicle color. There's a band of darker cloud right through here. Sort of directly below the blue here. I think I should be using my flat brush here. I'm going to use this synthetic flat. All right, I'm going to put my brush down. I'm getting the feel on the paper like it's not flowing quite the same way, and it's becomes something that you just recognize with experience. Okay, so as you continue to work, you'll get this sense that it feels like it's drying. You'll just know by the touch. And I can also see it, right? As I put a stroke down, it's sticking more than I want it to. So what do I do at this stage? At this stage, I would just dry the darn thing, and then I will re-wet it and continue. Now that sounds like the dumbest thing ever. Dry it so you can wet it again, but what the drying is going to do, it's going to set what I've already got. By the way, if you see any marks down here, this is the watermark from the paper. It tends to settle into the a little dip where it's embossed there. If you do get a hard line that maybe you're not looking for, weren't happy with, one thing that you can do when you re-wet is often redistribute some of that. But in this lower area, I'm really trying to keep a lot of the light here. I think it's still too light. There's always one way to find out, and that is by using your little squares. If it's your first time here, you might not know what I'm talking about, but these squares are these little pieces of cardboard with a little hole punched in the middle. And I compare that to my reference picture to see if my values are fairly close. Because, of course, in a sunset, the values are going to be really important. I don't need to dry too much up there because that I'm just going to wet. I'm not going to move anything. But I really do want the whole paper dry before I re-wet it. The Zbukovic clock. I don't know that I'm familiar with that, but I will have to look that one up. Now, I'm going to know when my paper's dry enough, when it feels like it doesn't feel like it's warped anymore. It will flatten out as it dries. If I were painting this on my own, I probably would do like a pair of these, or I would work on another project at the same time. It's fine to dry it with a dryer and everything, but I find that if you dry it with a dryer, you basically stop all the blending. If it dries naturally, the blending seems to be just a little bit more luscious. If that's a word to describe blending. But it just sort of continues the entire time as it's drying. The blending just seems to mellow out a little bit more. All right, so I've dried that quite a bit. It feels flat. Look at the wrinkles are all gone. There's no more warping of the paper. So this is dry. Now it's a little warm because I was using a heat tool rather than a hair dryer. Now I'm going to wet this again. Second verse, same as the first kind of thing. And you have to be a certain vintage to know what song that's from. If you know the answer, put it in the chat. All right, so once again, I'm just getting it all wet, even the parts I painted. Now, one thing I'm not going to do, especially at this stage when there's water on the paper now, I'm not going to swish back and forth and go back up. I'm going to start transferring this orange up into the blue. I just went down the page. That's it. I didn't, I'm going to check that I didn't miss any patches. Looks a little dry right there, but I want to make sure I didn't miss any patches. But it looks like I'm okay. It's starting to wrinkle again, as per usual. You're right, Herman's Hermits, but what's the name of the song? Not Sound of Music. I've painted something similar, Patty. I don't think I painted this exact one. I hope I didn't paint this one exactly. If I did, I guess I just really like it. But even if I did paint it before, I'm not sure I went into the in-depth descriptions that I'm doing this time. Henry VIII, ding, 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 you got it right. So, yeah, Donald Wendy, I'm not sure which you are, but MacGyver. Awesome. That's the one. Anyway, so I'm going to take some of this creamsicle color. You getting hungry for popsicles? So I'm blending in this one a little bit more. It's a little wet still. My paper's feeling a little sloppy. It's wanting to travel. The paint I just put on, it's wanting to travel a little bit more. So see how glossy it is? That's why. That's why that's traveling out of control. That's also, look at this, it's even settling in a valley here because I added in wet color on wet paper. The paper was quite wet. So I'm just going to tip it, let some of the water run off to the sides and wipe it off. So if it's really too soaking wet, this is another option for you. You can just tip it. Gravity pulls all that extra moisture down. You can see it all gathering here where the color is. And just run a paper towel along the side and voila, you're removing the water without actually touching the paper. It's just running down the side and I'm just absorbing it with my paper towel. My paper towel is getting quite wet at this stage. I'm kind of showing this all in slow motion, and I know some people are like, come on, Shelley, get on with it. I've had people even make comments like that, but the reason I'm going slow with my explanations is because I don't want you to feel like you have to race through this because it's wet, which is what I used to think. I only got a little time. I've got to get it done. And I would have this sort of, my heart would be racing and I'd be panicking as I was doing all of this. But I want to show you that you can actually relax as you do this. Enjoy the process. I did paint it before? Oh, shoot. Okay. All right. See, after I've been doing these demos since COVID. And I guess that adds up with once a week. That adds up to a lot of videos, and sometimes I forget. Why am I rewetting the whole sheet? I'm rewetting the whole sheet because if I only rewet a portion of it, it will make a water line. It will make a hard line somewhere in wherever the water stops. The paint will find the edge of that and it's going to make a watermark. You ever try to wipe a stain out of your clothes or something? You spot wash and it gets this little ring around it. That's exactly what happens with this. If you just do a patch of it, it doesn't hurt it to re-wet the whole thing. Not one bit. Doesn't hurt it one iota. So I am re-wetting the whole thing because that ensures that I'm not going to have any of those unsightly little lines. But that's a good question. I'm glad you brought it up because that is our intuitive thing to do, right? Well, I only need to paint the top part, so why am I re-wetting the whole thing? It's because you will get those telltale signs of the watermarks. All right, so let's continue on here. I feel like my brush might be a little wet for the paper. I'm just going to grab some paper towel here. I'm just leaning over, sorry. So I'm grabbing some paper towel here. And I'm going to just sort of blot to make sure any of the extra moisture's out of it. And it's getting to that nice satin sheen again. See that nice satin sheen? Even on the white part that I haven't painted yet, I can paint in here. Actually, that blue shape, I don't know if I have that right. I think I'm going to build a little bit more blue into here. Just using a small round for this, but a very, very light touch. There, that feels a little bit more like what I'm looking at. And I am going to use a light touch. I'm now with my orange color that I mixed up. Some parts of it feel like they might be starting to dry. This feels a little drier up here. Things are there's still shine, right? There's still a little shine on the paper. That tells me I can use this. If there's no shine, I'm not going to use this. If there's a bit of shine, I can buy myself a little more time with the spray bottle. If the paper doesn't have the shine, that spray bottle will cause little like pinholes in my wash. There's a couple more patches of blue I haven't really added in there. I think I'll do that now. So I left a little white spot there to put the blue. You're not going to put blue on top of orange. You're not going to put orange on top of blue. That combination doesn't look good. It's like a big Z in the sky here. Take a look at my puddle. It's not a big, wet, sloppy kind of puddle, right? It's not like if I picked this up and tipped it, that paint's not running anywhere. I could actually take my brush and run through it, and it'll leave a mark. That is not a super wet puddle. That's what I'm using because my paper's wet enough. It's adding a lot of moisture to this. Now that's a piece of lint or something. Sometimes you can just use the corner of your brush and just give it a little flick and you can take it out. If you can't get it out just with one little flick, just leave it to dry. Wipe it off when it's fully dry. Okay, so I'm putting a little more of that orange color in here. And take a little blue as well and fill in those white spaces. If I did do this one before, it'd be interesting to look to see if I'm doing anything different this time. So blotting on my paper towel. There's a hint of blue up here. Again, I'm not painting over any of the orange. They can kiss, but I am not overlapping those colors because it really doesn't make a pleasant color. And the value is pretty much the same for the blue as it is for the orange here. There's not a lot of difference. I obviously have to come in with some more rich color. So I'm going to start doing that. So in my puddle here on my palette, I would like to make the color even less diluted. I might be getting a bit too red. A little more yellow. And you can, if you don't have these colors, you can actually use your own variation of these. I'm using a warm yellow. I'm using a pink red. You might try using some quinacridone gold or something like that. Experiment a little bit, but what I would suggest is do a little color test to see if you are in the right family of color. It might be too, it might be too, like pumpkin orange or something like that. I didn't really want a pumpkin orange, so that's why I'm using a pinker red as opposed to say a cad red or a Rose D'Or, Scarlet Lake, something like that. Those are already orange reds. I'm using a pinker one so that it doesn't turn into such a brilliant, unnatural kind of orange. Now, let's check this. I've been yakking. How's the shine here? I still have a bit of shine, but I really better be careful because if this brush is too wet at this stage, it's going to give me problems. So okay, I think I'm all right. There's still a little bit of shine. If I need a little bit more blending, I can use my sprayer. I didn't spray a lot there. And also, when you're spraying, don't hold it close. Hold it way back. Like I'm at least 12 inches from my paper, at the very least. Vermilion. You know what? I don't know. You would have to try it with whatever yellow you plan to use. And it might, these colors can vary from brand to brand as well. So I don't like to tell you exactly what colors will work, unless it's colors I'm well familiar with. But I don't use a lot of vermilion personally, so I think depending on if the pigments are similar, I think you could get a good result. I'm going to get it a little wetter up in this corner. By the way, I am working flat, but this is something that you could tilt your board, but don't tilt it too far. It will look like the clouds are raining. And I will tilt my board back and forth if I'm trying to direct the paint to go somewhere. But I don't often work with my board tilted, to be honest. I generally work at a table. I bet most of you do anyway, but I work at a table most of the time. This puddle, once again, I can put my brush right through it like that, make a line that doesn't fill back in, so I'm not working with super, super wet color. I'm building up more color as well because, of course, you know what's going to happen. It's going to dry much lighter. Can't forget about that aspect. And you're probably wondering, why haven't I put any of the purple on yet? It's because it's the darker color. It's definitely going to dull things a little bit. And so I want to leave that for last because it's the darker. So I'm just going to bring a little more color here and there. I don't have to be using a flat brush at this stage, by the way. I could easily use, like a mop type brush or a round brush. I don't know, I'm just using this one because no special reason. But I am leaving this a little bit light at the bottom of the clouds. you know, as the sun sets, it tends to light the clouds from underneath rather than from above, like we normally see in the daytime. So it gets lit from underneath instead of above. I was always under the impression that I had to get the whole sky in, like just do it all in one go. Because if I wet it again, it would all move all over the place. And it did. It did move all over the place when I went back. The reason it did that is because I was using a paper where the paint wouldn't absorb in. I was using a acid-free paper, wood pulp paper that was treated to become acid-free, but the paint would sit on top more, and therefore I wasn't able to re-wet it without smearing everything. So if I just use a cotton paper, really absorbent cotton paper, these layers stay put. If you ever want to do anything where you're doing a lot of glazing or building up of layers, definitely use a cotton paper. That would be my suggestion to you. You ask another artist, they might tell you it's something completely different, and that's their prerogative. But for me, I just feel that the paper being absorbent is a real benefit. I'm going to bring a little bit more color through here just to make sure that this is blending in, matching what's kind of above here. I think it's probably a little bit more, it's pretty straight across. I was thinking it might have been on more of a diagonal, but it looks okay. All right, so the land is going to be down here somewhere, like about a third of the way down. And how's my shine? This is my $1 million question I'm always asking myself. And it's actually looking pretty good. If I want to add more, I can. I still can. My paper says I'm still shiny. I can do it. So I'm going to add a little bit more. Each addition gets a little stronger. Again, look at the dryness of that puddle. Doesn't fill back in. But I don't want my brush overloaded either. Okay, this is getting strong. But you know, I'm always loving the drama, especially a sunset. So this is going to dry lighter, and it won't have the same oomph once it's dry. Especially, I've always found that oranges, reds, those kinds of colors don't tend to stay as brilliant once they're dry. All right. Okay, so I want you to notice down here, this part, there's no shine. Just kind of, I'm too close to the light there. But I can't catch any light, any shine on this part at the bottom. So if I wanted to work down there, I wouldn't be able to. It is become too dry there. But where because it's still kind of good up in the cloud area where I want to work, you know, see that shine? I'm going to use a little bit. I'm going to put a little bit of that purple color in now. So I'm going to take some of my blue. Let's take my more cobalt, I guess, than anything else. And I'm going to add, I don't want a bright purple. I want a dull purple. So, but let's do it this way. I'll put a little permanent rose, and you can see that's going to make a, quite a bright purple. If I want to dull this down, I can go into, oh, sorry, I guess you can't quite see that. Let me move that over a little bit. So I used a little permanent rose in this, and they gave me a purple, all right, but it's kind of a bright purple. And I'm going to I want to dull it down a little bit, so I'm going to steal a little bit of this orange. And that's going to give me a duller purple. I think I could use a little more red. There, that's giving me a dull purple. It's because I put blue and orange, as I said. I've been saying this constantly. They're complements. They're going to cancel each other out and make a dull color. So if you want to make a color a little duller, you can use a bit of the other color. Just use it sparingly. Okay, so I'm going to go a little bit more. I dulled it more than I wanted, I think. So I'm just going to put a little bit more color in here. Now, let's see, how's my shine? Check it again. I'm going to just test this out. Let's just test this out, see if I've got... Now it looks a little bit blue, but on top of the orange, that's going to not look so bright. So here we go. I could use a little bit more blending. 2 very light spritzes, and I think I'd like to blend a little bit more. So I'm going to put a little more orange underneath. That creamy color underneath. I'm going to use a little gravity to help some of this paint flow. Whoop. Sorry, I'm hitting my microphone here. All right, so I'm tipping and tilting and really trying to get all of this soft. Now, what I accomplished here was I was able to actually shape those clouds, not spoil my blue. I actually have a distinct line here between the blue and the orange. It's actually a line that you can see. So it is giving me a softening that I wouldn't be able to get with my brush. So I'm going to wipe off my edges. I'm going to dry this, and let's just see what we have. Just refilling my spray bottle as I dry at the same time. Now, if by the time you got this done, you're not as, your color's not as rich, it's not as blended as you want, it's not this or the other thing, you do have the opportunity of rewetting. Once again, as you are rewetting things, the idea is you don't want to brush too much. If you brush across this, you will start moving color, and it won't necessarily end up the way you're hoping, because it'll blend together. But what will help is it will soften things a little bit more. Like, even as this is drying, it's getting softer. This is the most important part of this painting. And I can tell right away, I'm still kind of light in some areas. Especially as this is drying, I'm noticing, oh gosh, it's still light. It always dries lighter. So you do have to sort of compensate for how much lighter it's going to dry by building more color into it in the first place. But you can see what I mean about the orange gets a lot sort of duller as I go along, like as it dries. Alrighty, this is getting there. It's almost flat again. I wish I had a magic button to just press and this would be dry. Wouldn't that be great? It's a carry part. Oh, scary? Did you mean to say scary part of the painting to do? Yeah. I think you meant scary, but that's true. It's not Saunders paper. My paper is Arches 140-pound cold press. By the way, you could equally use a 300-pound. If you don't want to do the stretching process, you could use a 300-pound. Now, one thing to understand about a 300-pound paper is that it's basically twice as thick. So it's a thicker, stiffer board, but it's also twice as absorbent. So you're going to use more paint, you're going to use more water, it will take longer to dry, all of those things, just because of the extra thickness. But it will blend beautifully because of that thickness. So there we go. All right, so once again it's flat. You can see it's totally flat again, and it's dry. Now it's time to check things. Okay, so I want to check a couple of things, like, is that part of the reference, if I painted it about the same value, I think I could still afford to be a little bit darker. You cannot put the trees on and then decide, oh, I think I'd like that cloud a little bit darker. This is the moment. You have to do it now. You cannot do it later. You just got to trust me on that one. You just can't do it later. There's no way. If you put a dark color down on your painting and then you wet it, you're just going to smear the whole thing. Because when you're putting a thick color down, it does tend to sit on top, and darker colors will just smear more easily, more noticeably for sure. All right, so I'm going to do a little bit more. I think I'd like to see this blend in a little bit more. I'd like to see my orange a little stronger, a few more darks and things like that. So I'm going to use my spray bottle to wet this. It's a little safer than just using my brush because it's not pushing anything on the paper. It's just wetting the paper. Now it makes everything kind of wet on my table, but we have to suffer for our art. All right, so I've wet that. Back to my hacky brush, but I will, it's a really light touch now. I'm just redistributing those droplets so that I have a wet surface. The tendency is to want to spray that really close because you don't want it going all over your table, but it's more important to preserve your painting. So I'm doing the light brush again. And I should be back to a nice shiny paper again. So I'm going to put a little bit more red in my orange here. I think it could blend a little bit better. Just one more spritz there. I'm going to use a little bit more of that yellowy color because yellow seems to be kind of vanishing at this point. Might use a little bit more of that too. This one I don't mind too much up here, but I do think it can come down a little bit more than I had it. Just once again, another little spritz, help keep things flowing. And I'm going to go to this purple again. And I'm going to put a little more red in it this time. I just think that will make it look a little bit better. Less gray and a little bit more purple. Blotting so that it doesn't run all over the place out of control. And liking that better. And I think it comes down here, just a hint of it comes down onto this part of the cloud. And I do think this could be a little bit stronger as well, but I think I'll use my flat brush there. Now I can tell it's kind of running. I have my brush is a little bit wetter than I want, so I'm not getting quite the control I'm looking for. So let's make my brush just a little bit drier. And I'm going to take just the tiniest bit of orange here and put a little cerulean in it. Now that sounds like a contradiction, that I shouldn't be putting those two complements together. But there is a little bit of a duller area. Looks too orange on this printout, but here, look here, right at the sort of above the trees, the distant trees, just above that. It's a little bit of a blue-gray, or almost a greenish color, because that orange is mixing with the blue and giving a little bit of a odd color to the sky right there. I'm seeing that anyway. Hope you are too. You can see it's not much color I'm using here. And my brush isn't like loaded with a lot of wet color or anything like that. Looks like I got something undissolved there. Okay, if there's anything else I want to add to my sky, this is it. I've still got a little shine. I think I want to add a little bit more down on the bottom of this cloud. I'm trying for this to be the last pass on this. Just a little bit of wispiness there. And I know some trees are actually going to come up and cover most of that anyway. Not that it doesn't matter, it certainly does, but... All right, so wipe the edges, give this a dry, and then I'm going to go ahead and put my trees in. There's a little bit in the reflection I want to do too, so I think I might just do that before I dry it. But I don't have a lot of shine left down there. I've got just a little bit. I want to bring some of the orange color down into the water, and I'm going to do this not as one big smooth area, because I don't think it needs to be here. I think I got that corner a little bit dry. Now some of that's going to disappear into the landscape. And I don't mind a few little streaks in this, because this is actually the water, and I think that just kind of enhances that feeling of water. This side's a little bit more yellow. This side over here tends to be a little bit more orange. So maybe you can see that you can almost see some of the strokes there. I'm okay with that. I like that variation in there. I think that's kind of feels like water to me. Anybody painting along with me? Just curious. Let me know if you are. And if you ever do paint along with any of my demos, if you tag me, I love it. I absolutely love it when you do, because that way I get to see what you're making from my demos, because, you know, I sit here in my studio by myself and I'm talking away to a camera, and I know you're there, but I like when we get this two-way thing going. So if you tag me, I get to see what you work on too. Alrighty, I think it's almost time to just get this dry and get on with the show here. So I'm going to dry this once more. I'll sketch out my drawing, which will be kind of a quick sketch. It won't be a long drawn out process drawing this on. One thing I should note is that this reference picture is a longer, taller format than what I'm actually painting. If I wanted the longer, skinnier format, I probably could have cut off some of this. What I might do is just add a little bit more land to the right. That might work. Not so crucial in something like this where it's a landscape with just nature, but if you were doing something like a building or something like that in your painting, it would end up looking sort of stretched out if you were trying to sort of follow the outer dimensions of your painting as your guideline to where to put things. Once again, I'm trying to get my paper totally flat. The one thing I think drawing naturally will do for you as well is that instead of sort of drying the surface and the little fibers that stick up kind of get frozen in that raised position, if you will, like when you wet the paper, the fibers swell and they stick up more. So I'm kind of locking it by drying it. Whereas if they dry naturally, it will sort of settle down more naturally as the paper dries. But when you dry it fast like this, you do kind of, like, the roughness of the paper feels a little bit more coarse. It's not going to affect what I'm doing, but if your paper feels a little bit rougher after you've dried it and everything and put paint on it, that might be the reason why. Okay, I think I'm all right now. And that's going to have to cool for a moment before I actually start to paint, but I can start thinking about mixing up that some color for my landscape. So let me just clear a spot here. I don't think I'm going to use this purple again. And although this is silhouetted, I probably did this the last time where I silhouetted, but I didn't. I just used one color. I think I would like to hint at some of the green trees in here. So I'm going to take some, I'm taking areolin, a yellow, lemony type of yellow, and I'm going to mix that with Payne's Gray, which gives me a really deep green. You can see pretty much any yellow added to Payne's Gray, it's going to give you a green of some sort. Now over here, I'm going to put more Payne's Gray. So now I have a dark, really dark area, but I also have a lighter, not light, it's still a dark green, but I've got a green range in here on my palette. So all right, and now I've got some color mixed up, but I need the drawing to work from. So I'm going to, come on pencil, where'd I put you? What? Oh, here it is. It's hiding behind my water container. Try not to erase a lot on your drawing. If you're worried about or on your painting, I should say, don't erase, like don't take an eraser and start erasing. You will lift some of the color. So what I would recommend is that if you have a piece of tracing paper, do all your sketching on that. Then you can transfer a clean drawing to your paper and not worry about erasing on your nicely painted new sky that you've just put in. So, but because I am working live here, I'm not going to take the extra time for that. I'm going to just jump right in here and go for broke. Put a distant shoreline there. The trees, something like this. I just have to scribble something across there so I have an idea. The order than that image there. So something's got to give, right? And so I'm going to take a little off the reflection. This comes almost just a little past halfway. And now for the tree. So for this tree, I'm looking for the stem, or the trunk, and I'm looking. It's not straight up and down. It's a little bit on an angle. It is not dead center. It's actually off to the right of center a little bit, I think. If I put my pencil in the middle, it's just leaning a little bit past center. I really don't want it that centered anyway, so I'm going to come in here with this not so straight tree trunk. The next one is pretty straight and it's a little taller. Actually touches that top cloud, so I'm going to put this here. And it looks like there's another one tucked in there and another one off the side, which we don't see the tree trunk for. But that's what I've drawn in. That's what I'm committed to now because I can't undo it. I can't erase on my... It's not that I can't erase, but a kneaded eraser would probably be the better option if you had to erase. But try to avoid it. It's not as nice to paint on paper that you have... been erasing on. You can damage the surface. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some of my green lighter towards the top, and I'm working on dry this time, so I'm just going to come in and try to replicate the treetops here. There's like a kind of a big one sticking up here. Big jack pine or something like that. Try to make it interesting, some ups and downs, that sort of thing. Now I'm going to quickly, before any of that dries, I'm coming in with a little bit darker color. Darker again. This is so dense back here on this distant shore that we don't see any of the light coming through there. But I want to come along the bottom here with the darkest color, and I'm trying to work quick here so that I don't get a bunch of brush marks in my tree line here. Well, this edge, that's going to carry on into the rest of this. I really won't see that. But even though I'm going to put something dark on top, what I want to do is kind of blur that edge in so that I don't have a ghosty type of thing showing behind my main island here. This was actually an island, not just a shore. Okay, so it's a pretty dark, pretty solid, but it's not colorless. It does have a little bit of green in there. Try to get it all wet at the same time. Getting it all wet at the same time is what prevents the brush marks, which you wouldn't see very much on the camera anyway, because it's going to just show you a lot of contrast. But I do want to talk about the wispy kind of tree we have here. We see a lot of branch action going on here, like the branches that come out, but the branches are kind of naked. They don't have. It's not like a full tree that's like lush with lots of color. It faces a lot of wind and harsh weather and things like that, so it loses a lot of its foliage. And so I'm gonna just get this dry so that I can do the part on top. Meanwhile, I'll mix up more color. Two hands going at the same time here. I know I've got a big area to deal with here, so I better make sure that this puddle is large. And unlike when I'm working on wet paper, I need to really need to make a lot of wet color as opposed to the drier color that I was using on the wet surface. I need wet color on a dry surface. Okay, so I actually do have a couple of lines through there that I don't like, so let's talk about what I would do with that. I'm going to use a little bit bigger brush. I think that's going to be more useful in this case, because the wetter the more the brush can hold, the more I can apply the color quickly. Terry's asking, am I using neutral tint and green? Yes, Francine has answered. So Aureolin and Payne's Gray is what I have used here for this green. So what do I do about this? Well, I can just take some of my color in my natural hair brush here, and if I re-wet all this, just get it wet, light touch so that I don't get a bunch of brush marks in it. Load up the color, put lots of color in there or lots of wet moisture in there, I should say, can be a lot of color, but it could also, you know, if it was a lighter color for whatever reason, it would need to be very wet color for this to really do the trick. So you don't have a bunch of brush marks and things in there. So I did get a brush mark, so this is how I'm fixing it. I'm coming in with a little bit more paint. I have to be careful with this shape here. And it, you know, it's like what I said with the sky. You can't just wet a patch of it. You got to do the whole darn thing. Even if the parts of it don't have brush marks in it, you got to do the whole thing. Otherwise, you get new hard lines. There. Voila. No, this will have no lines in it. Just going to soften this edge here so it blends into the foreground island. And you should be good to go. So the issue of the lines that were there is now resolved. Okay, if there's a few little variations in here, that would be actually fine, because that's really going to look a bit more like a like the textures that you would see in the foliage. Those straight lines that I did with my brush, that doesn't look right at all. But if I've got some little dabbly areas in here, that's going to just kind of look the way trees look. So going to use lots more color here. All right, so we have a shoreline that all but vanished. We can't even see where the island ends and the water begins, but we know it's there, right? Because we've got the reflection of the color, the sky color in the water. So we know it is reflection, and we can tell by the texture in the water. So what I'm going to do is I've got my bottom shoreline here. Let's just say this is my bottom shoreline. And I'm going to go back to my palette constantly to keep all of this good and wet. All right, so there's some, this is darker. I'm using the dark stuff right down here at the bottom. That's kind of the darkest area. It's almost plain Payne's gray. Needs to be a little darker than this one because it's closer. Things that are closer will have more contrast. And there's a couple little branches sticking out here. I'm not going to fuss with them too much, but I want to have the feeling of a few little bits of foliage there. Back to my palette, constantly putting loads of wet color down. Remember, your wet color has a lot of water in it, so it's going to dry much lighter. And this top edge I want to keep wet, because I know this top edge I got to come back and continue up from here. Maybe I'll just roll up my sleeve and continue up anyway, and come back to this one down here. All right, so this little island is sitting up high from the water. Here in Muskoka, not here in Muskoka, I'm not in Muskoka right now, but when I was here in Muskoka, there's a lot of the Canadian Shield. If you're not from this area, you might not be familiar with what the Canadian Shield is, but basically it's a lot of The glaciers came through, and the ice basically took all the top layer of the soil off of the land, and you end up with a lot of sort of exposed rock in much of Ontario, which has beauty in its own right. Now, you're probably wondering, why am I leaving all of those little gaps? It's these little holes that you need in the foliage to show the light coming through. But you know what? I've started too low, because if... Ooh, I just dropped my brush. Okay, so let's fix this. We'll just put a few lines through here, because I'm going to do that anyway. Good thing it didn't land on me. Anyway, so I've got a little bit of the bottom done there, but this landmass is actually continuing on behind this island, so I can't have those little sky holes coming through until I get above where that would be. Then I can start to have a lot of those little bits of sky peeking through there, which I think is really quite interesting. Here, let's do it this way. I can probably see it a little better this way. So I'm focusing more on those sort of horizontal branches, and I will take a tree trunk up through that as I go along. This is all really wet. I don't know if you can see the shine on that. All that paint is nice and wet. That's what keeps the brush marks away. And some of this foliage here is so broken up. I feel like I could almost just paint with the side of my brush and get something more natural looking. So hopefully you can see what I'm talking about when I say I'm painting with the side of my brush. There'll be some smaller lines that I'll add in with a smaller brush later, but I think I just want to get the general feeling of those branches. And they're getting more and more sparse as I come up the tree. It's just mostly at the tips. It feels very out of control at this stage, just because, you know, we're so used to using the tip of our brush just for control. But this will pull together. If I take a long bristle brush like this one, I can take and indicate where the tree trunk is, and it's kind of crooked, so I'm not really trying for a really perfect straight line. And there's a lot of little branches that come off of this as well. So now, really important to watch the angle of the branches. You know, are they really angled up? Are they straight out, or are they angled, you know, down on each side? You know, the longer the branches, the more they kind of hang down a bit. But I want to put these branches in while the paint is still a little bit wet, so that I don't get so that it all blends together with the paint that I've just put down. A couple of naked branches through there. And of course they all have to connect to the tree trunk. It doesn't make any sense otherwise. This is where I'm still holding my brush way back. I find that if I hold my brush way back at the end of the handle, that my tree branches tend to look more natural. Because if I try to control it too much, it looks like that's exactly what I did. I was trying to control too much, and it doesn't give the right impression. So I just find it looks a little better. Feel free to use a smaller brush here if you want to, but the key is a light touch right on the tip of the brush. And make sure your brush has longer bristles, because if it doesn't have the longer bristles, you're going to run out of paint before you get to the end of your stroke. So I'm looking at the anatomy of the tree, how it's kind of leaning. A lot of these jack pines tend to look like they're ready to fall over. They tend to blow with the wind and develop this prominent lean. Maybe a broken off branch once in a while, something like that. There we go. And I might even add just a couple more bits of dry brush here and there, blotting it on my paper towel so I don't get too much paint. I want some of these to look a little wispy. But some of them just don't have very much foliage left on them at all. So I did the kind of big blocky ones. Now I'm just kind of skimming the paper with my brush. It's catching the texture of the paper and giving me a similar wispy look. So I've got a combination. Some of those are fairly solid and some are kind of wispy. They always have this little sweep upward at the ends, these kinds of trees. I think it's really helpful to observe the way the branches go, the way the foliage goes, you know, whether it's a little hook on the end of the branch or whatever. 4 Brush Miles is asking, with New Year in, do you know what you plan to paint professionally in advance? Or do I come by it by what inspires you in the moment? I mean, this outside of the demo teaching you do. Well, a lot of my in-person classes are themed, and so I'm aiming not to repeat a lot of stuff. But a lot of my ideas for what I'm going to teach are offered to me by you. This is one that I get questions sometimes by email and so on, and this is one that I've had quite a bit. You know, how do you control the water? This one's a perennial question, so I thought I just would bring this one up again so that we can get a little bit of better understanding of it. I may have demonstrated this one before, but maybe not with the descriptive dialogue that goes with it. But yeah, if you have ideas, please send them along. I usually will take the most popular ones and address those first, and then I will kind of work my way down the list. Some of you have even sent me a reference picture. Please do not send me something you found on Pinterest or something that you found on Facebook or something like that. Generally speaking, those are copyright. So I will not instruct something that is going to infringe on the copyright of someone else. So it has to be one of your own if you are going to send me something. All right, so I'm going to work on my next tree. This one doesn't have quite that much foliage on it, but it does have a lot of the branches that come out quite a long way here. I'm overlapping these trees a little bit more, I think, than what the reference shows, but that's okay. Doesn't matter. Don't do what I just did, which is evenly space all your branches. They do crisscross. Some hang down lower. They will crisscross, and they are not a formula where you just have like exactly a 1/4 inch in between every branch or anything like that. So do watch that you're not falling into that pattern trap. All right, so I'm going to take my natural hairbrush again. It could be round, it can be a synthetic, but I find that the natural hairbrushes just work a lot better here. And I have to set that down and blot my brush. My paint is a little bit overly diluted. I need the richer color here to cover. So there we go. The angle starts getting a little steeper at the top of the tree, the angle of the branches, I mean. Okay, this next tree, it's really hard to see where the tree trunk is, but I'm going to do my best. And I'm going to carry on with the side, painting with the side of the brush. Because I like the way the foliage looks when I use the side of the brush as opposed to the tip of the brush. I think it looks a lot more natural. If you have to mix more paint, getting the consistency the same is important. You don't want it suddenly watery, right? What paper am I using today? I'm using Arches 140-pound cold press. And I'm working on a quarter sheet, so it's 11 by 15. And I pre-stretched it, so it is stapled down while it was wet. Gets pretty dense through here. Don't mind a few little pinholes in this foliage here, though. I think that just looks really natural. When you're doing your branches, don't make them like one big blob, solid blob. Let that little bit of lacy aspect come into your foliage. It feels more natural. And the angle gets steeper and steeper as I come up to the top of the tree. So I'm angling my brush in the same way, you can tell. But almost all the foliage has this tiny little flick, like upward sweep. It's not a curl per se, but it's just a little flick at the end that just gives a little bit of an upward reach for the sky kind of feeling. Alrighty, so now we've got the one on the left. We don't even see the tree trunk on this one. But I love how the sky kind of shows through the trees here. I think that's really quite pretty. I'm going to put a little bit more through this. Some of the areas are just a little bit more dense. I want to make sure I get that same sort of vibe when I paint this. And if you're using the side of your brush, it's the same thing applies. You're going to use a really light, just scarcely touching the paper kind of effect. Do I ever use 300-pound cold press paper? And if so, for what kind of painting? Actually, I had a piece of 300-pound out, and I thought, no, I got this one that's already stretched, so I'll use this one instead and save my 300-pound for something else. I would use, and this might surprise some of you, but I might use a 300-pound for like a portrait. And why? It's because you can get smoother, I find I can get smoother washes with 300-pound than I can get even with 140-pound. And part of that has to do with the extra absorption. And the fact that I can layer up so many times. But it does. The reason I decided to go with this one for today is because I mentioned this earlier, that if I were to use the 300-pound, it uses more paint. It takes longer to dry, which, when you're doing a live demo, you don't really want it. We already spent enough time watching me paint like dry things here. And so I didn't want to use a 300-pound for that. But yeah, if I was working on my own and I wanted to have something with lots of smooth layers on it, I would probably use a 300-pound. A lot of people use 300-pound just to avoid having to stretch, as if stretching were some sort of terrible fate. And it's really not. It's pretty simple process. The only thing it takes is patience, right? Because you can't paint on it right away. which bothers some people, I guess. And people just want instant everything nowadays. So you may not get, you might have to wait until tomorrow to paint. If you were stretching your watercolor paper. Okay, so I'm revisiting some of these areas that look like they're a little thin, which only adds to the texture, like the dimensionality of it, because, you know, if some of the areas look a little lighter than others, it will give the sense of a little bit more texture on the trees. All right, now this area down here just feels like it's dried a little bit light. I'm going to go in with a little more color down in here. Because I want this to be darker than my distant hill. I don't know how well that's showing up on the camera, but it is a little bit darker. Can't really see any detail through this silhouetted part here. But now I have the idea of some reflection. And I'm going to use some of the same technique I used up here. Well, I'm going to go sideways, just parallel to the water flow. And it'll skip over the paper. My brush isn't too wet, so it skims over the paper and gives a very subtle effect here. If I want to add more in this area, I'd have to let that dry before adding more, because otherwise it just starts filling in. Let me see here. Just going to come down a little bit further where it's solid, because so the solid area up here is going to reflect in the water. And so this, I'm pretty much using just Payne's gray down in this area here, but let me just talk about, you know, the ways I could create this effect. I could use a fan brush to give the illusion of these little lines in the water. But the thing I find about using a fan brush is it tends to look like all the lines are too lined up. It looks too man-made. So I'm more inclined to just randomly put little dashes in. Now, the size of the dashes actually matter. I'm going to use a combination of this with this once this is dry. But it's the same as this. If I just keep blending it all together and going over, like if I stay in one spot and I keep painting and painting and painting, what ends up happening is that it all kind of fills in, and then you lose a lot of your lines. So I'm just going to put some lines on here, and then I'll revisit as needed, kind of thing. I'm probably leaving more gaps than I need to, but that's okay. Better to have too many gaps. I mean, this color showing through too many in the beginning, because I can fill that in easy enough. But one thing I can't do is get it back. So I'd rather just put some lines down there and then adjust. And there's this kind of branch that comes out. It's kind of like a fallen, just dead branch, I guess, in the water there. It's kind of an interesting little thing. I'll put that in there. But I do need the shadow for it. So now that this is dry, because it's already dried there, I can put a little bit more on there. And you can see it ends up filling that in and feels natural. So I'm going to do the same thing here at the edge of this. Just a very, like there's hardly any paint in my brush, and look at my brush. It's all bent over like that. And so it's giving me more of an irregular, natural looking reflection here, but I want to do some of this over here. I want to get some of the same texture because it looks weird. It looks like it's too smooth right here, and then there's this motion in the water here. So I need to have the area that's reflecting sky to also have some motion. So I'll clean out my brush nice and well because that was a dark color I was using, and I'm going to come back to that, but I'm going to use some of this color here. I still have it, so I'm going to take a little bit of this color from my clouds in my sky and blot my brush so it's not too wet, and I'm going to go horizontally across the paper and get the same sort of motion feeling in the water that I had elsewhere, that I had where the darks are. Okay, so now it feels like there's some continuity there. I've got some of this, some of the same texture going across. Yeah, this is my go-to brush, it seems. I really like these natural hair brushes. This is a squirrel hair brush. It's by Biaelk, Biaelk. There, on my website, this one right here, there's a page called Materials. And you can see all the materials I use, including links to places where you could potentially look for any of the materials I list. But I'm going to revisit this now that it's dry and put some more little lines through here. Seems a little darker right below this tree here. That is being what's being reflected. But with the motion in the water, we can't really identify the reflection as like a mirror. Like if the water weren't moving, this would be like a mirror. But since there's a little motion in the water, we don't see it. So just getting the sense of it without trying to paint a perfect duplicate of the reference picture. Okay, I think I might add in a couple of more just little branches and tree trunks and things in the upper part. They're reasonably straight, but they're not all lined up like telephone poles. They, some of them angle a bit and, have crooked trunks and things like that. So don't overthink this. Doesn't need to be perfect. It just needs to be convincing. All right, so we need a few branches coming out. Try not to have any foliage just floating in air. You should have a branch connected to it. And that's an interesting trick, to have foliage just floating in the air. I think that's probably about enough. Now, step back, assess. I feel like there could be a little bit more density through some of this. This tree in particular just seems to be quite dense. So I'm going to just come in with a little bit more here. So I'll do this at the end, right? I'll take a look and assess whether or not certain areas are feeling similar to what I'm trying to portray. Doesn't have to be exact, just needs to be close enough. And it just felt like it just needed a little bit more filling in here. I like all these little windows in this lower portion here. I feel like that is working well. So a little bit of push and pull as I go along. Right, I feel like that tree trunk is looking a little bit skinny. I might make that a little bit denser, a little bit wider. There, that feels a little bit more substantial, and couple more branches, and I think that looks lighter on the screen. Let me just do a little adjustment, one little quick thing, and see if I can get this looking a little bit more accurate, I guess. There, that's a little bit better, I think, value-wise. the camera's not really picking it up quite so well, but this island at the back, or the land mass at the back, I do actually have that a bit paler than this one. And so, you know, you can actually see, like, follow the land there. It's pretty hard to see even in this that there's a difference, but in order to feel that, like, this one's pushed back, I mean, the higher shoreline actually feels like it's pushed back. And the fact that it is actually lighter also tells that same message. Now let's just take off this tape, because it always looks better when the tape comes off. I won't take off the staples until this has had a good day to dry or so. I want to make sure that it's dry right through to the back of the paper. I did a lot of wetting there. You never know, there might be some little bit of moisture hiding back in the back of this, on the back side of this paper here. So I don't want to be flirting with danger here and pull it off. I just made my hands all messy, but okay, so that's what it looks like all finished up. I'm kind of happy with it. I think, yeah, I could have made my sky even a little darker, a little bit more dramatic, that sort of thing. But I do feel like it's got the same similar type of vibe, I think, and I can definitely live with this. So let me just come back for a second and tell you thank you so much for being here. I know sometimes I go on, and it seems like I'm moving along pretty slowly, but it's so that I can explain my process better. So I apologize if it seems to drag at times, but sometimes we just have to wait for paint to dry. That's an important part of this whole aspect. So if you enjoyed it, you know what to do. So thank you so much again. Have a wonderful week, and we'll see you again next week. Bye for now.